All right, we are rolling live. There we go. Okay, so oh no, you know what, Steve, can you hear me relatively? Realize I'm not connected on the best Wi-Fi network here. Is it choppy? I think you're muted, but I
Yeah, it is.
not correctly. The answer is yes. Yes, choppy. Okay, let me just change Wi-Fi networks. I might lose you for a second. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now? More consistency.
Good.
Yes, I hear you,
Yes,
Rabbi.
so I'm going to go with
Yes.
that. Okay, fantastic. Okay. All right, still working here. YouTube working good. Okay. All right. So last we left off, we finished Siv Zion. We are Siv Ration and Dalet Siv Chet. Ches and Test should be the conclusion of this. I'm actually hopeful that we'll finish it today. We've been talking about what can be done Erev Shabbos, shortly before Shabbos begins, related to foods that can be placed shortly before Shabbos or cannot be placed. So we've definitely gone back and forth about what is and isn't okay. We've talked a lot about bread in the ancient ovens where they would stick the bread onto the side of the oven. Could this be done before Shabbos? What was the level? Well, it has to have formed some sort of level of, the dough has to have formed a level of like a crust, or just like the golden or browning of the dough, in order for that to continue to bake into Shabbos. Otherwise, there's a fear that you would attempt to play with the fire in order to hasten the process of baking. We talked about this in the context of cooking. Certain foods which whether it was fruit we talked about, that this really exists for. We talked about this in the context of onions and eggs and meat. What kind of meat? Some meats are harder and tougher and thicker, and therefore there is no such thing as hastening the cooking process so quickly, on Friday night. And it would be okay even without a certain level of cooking. So we've definitely explored this topic in depth of Friday late afternoon into Shabbos. What can you do? What can you allow to continue to cook into Shabbos? So now in the same vein, it's really the same thing, but just a different application. Sif Ches begins. It's the third line of page 52, at least in my edition. Lo yimale adam kereira asasiot v'tur musin v'yitain letoch hatanur erev Shabbos samuch lachashecha mibnei shedvarim elu tzrichim bishul rav v'dato aleim la'achlam la'alter. So a person is not allowed to fill their pot with asasiot. Now, what are asasiot? So the built-in definition here, I don't know if again these are the Ramah's definitions. Sometimes they were just perushim that were added to explain words that are maybe not so frequent. So asasiot, not exactly a word that appears with great frequency. So perush mine kitnios hagdelos be'eretz Yisrael v'lo b'Bavel. These were types of legumes which grew in Eretz Yisrael but did not grow in Bavel. And also turmusin. Turmusin appears in the Mishnayos and the Seder Zrav a few times. Just lupine. Hold on. Now I'm blanking on turmusin. I want to say it's lupine. Is the definition here turmusin? Hold on. Turmusin. looking at the definition, turmos. Yeah, here, lupine. I got that correct. Okay, I have some memory
So
from my
it
study.
said לתוך התנור means into water, hot water, or
So you're not allowed to
just
place
like
the
that.
the kedera, a pot of
The hot water, right?
well, not
Or
hot
liquid.
water. Let's say maybe there's water in it, but even if it's, let's say,
Right.
dry,
Okay.
which I don't know exactly how you cook dry legumes like beans. It's probably in water, but
Right.
you can't really cook things like beans without water. You could dry roast it, but it doesn't seem like a great idea. Yeah, I mean, yitain letoch hataner, and then you place it into the oven, erev Shabbos, samach hashecha, and then place it into the oven. And now here we're going to be bedafka. We're going to be very medakdek about what tanur. Here we've moved away from so much talking about the three types of ancient ovens: the kira, the kofach, and the tanur. Here we actually mean the Talmudic tanur, which is the most strict. It's constructed in a way that it retained its heat very well and got to a very high temperature. It had a very triangular shape. It opened in one spot at the top, such that again the heat was very intense in a tanur. So we're talking about that Talmudic tanur. And place it there into the ancient Talmudic tanur on Erev Shabbos close to dark. You're not allowed to do that. Why not? Because these things, the legumes, they don't need a lot of cooking. Bishul Rav. They're very short cooking process for these foods. And what's my intention? My intention is to eat them immediately, right? It's better when it's warm. It's better when it's fresh. It's better. And these things will be ready on Friday night. And because of this, even if it's not completely cooked, therefore, it is like, even though it is not completely cooked, it's not completely cooked. Usually when you say, oh, it's partially cooked, we're a little more lenient. It's partially cooked. It's almost there. We treat it like any other dish which began to cook but did not cook fully, where it is prohibited to do shahiyah. It's prohibited to continue to allow this to cook in from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos.
How about chulent? Chulent has been start cooking before Shabbat.
So
and it's beans.
So the reason that chulent is going to be allowed is, so again, there are two things here. Number one, chulent is if it has meat in it. So usually the meat is raw at that point, and we say that raw meat is allows it to be able to continue cooking into Shabbos, because no one in their right mind is going to play with the dials or the knobs, because it's not going to be ready until the next day anyways, until lunch. So therefore, there's already an exception cut out for anything that has raw meat. And even if it's a veggie cholent, so then you have one more thing you have to do for sure. And this is what the Ramah is about to mention in just a moment. So hang tight for just a second. This is the same law for a kira or a kofach. If it's not fully cooked, you can't have it cooked from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. Why? When? Kishe'enan, Ramah adds in, Kishe'enan grufin uktumim. When it's not garuf akatum, when it hasn't been, the coals haven't been raked to the side or out in such a way that it becomes more complicated to play with the heat source, or the coals have been covered in ashes, right? So if it's not one of those two things, then yes, it's a problem. If it has, so today the equivalent is covering the dials and the knobs, so then it's okay, because otherwise otherwise there's a fear that you'll stoke the coals and hasten the cooking process, playing with the fire, things that of course are not allowed on Shabbos on a D'oraisa level.
So here is the situation here is that the difficulty here is that you would play with the fire. Like there is no issue
That's the fear
about the cooking process, which is not completely done before Shabbat, and it's actually cooking on Shabbat. That's not the issue.
No, because it's perhaps the case that so there are two standards of cooking, and we'll have to talk about this in a moment. There are two standards about when something is cooked. There's machal ben drusai, it's cooked to a minimal level that it's minimally edible, and then there's fully cooked. So the question is, when is it considered cooked? So probably for the purposes of a deoraisa, you may need to be fully cooked in order to not violate the Isser of Bishul from the continuation of, or from the hastening of the cooking. So that's number one. So it could actually be a problem of Bishul. And number two, you have a Havara problem. You're actually creating a fire, a greater fire. So you're actually perhaps violating two biblical prohibitions. But there's no problem of it cooking on Shabbos on a biblical level. If something is done before Shabbos and it goes into Shabbos, I don't touch it. There's no biblical prohibition I could violate. It's maybe only rabbinic one at best. So here, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, like the first opinion that we saw in the previous siman, that fully cooked is the standard for shehiyah. The Ramah paskins like the second standard, which is if it's kamachal ben drusai, so it's fully half cooked or a third cooked, then it can continue cooking into Shabbos. And that's without grufo ketuma, without these raking of the coals or the covering of the ashes with putting the ashes on the coals. If you have that, even the Shulchan Aruch would agree that you don't need fully cooked, because you're not going to play with the fire. And that's all the Ramah is adding here. I don't think that the Shulchan Aruch would argue with him on this point. What they argue is the standard. And what is really fascinating to look at this and say, boy, it does seem like the Shulchan Aruch himself favors the first opinion that he mentioned, because he doesn't even mention the second opinion of Kamachal ben Drusai in this whole discussion, which again, I don't know what Sephardim do. I don't know what the standard is.
First opinion?
The first opinion is that unless it's fully cooked, you can't do shehiyah. You can't have the Erev Shabbos into Shabbos situation, unless it's grufo ketuma. It's the coals have been raked in such a way that it makes it hard to play with them. So, anywho, let me just turn this off so I don't get any more dinging going on over here. So that's just something to note as a side point. It would seem to me that the Shulchan Aruch holds with the first opinion. I don't know what Sephardim practically hold on the matter. I really don't know. The Ashkenazi psak is very clear in the previous siman. So for Ashkenazim, I could certainly feel confident in saying we hold Kamachal ben Drusai, that this standard would be lower. That even this case of the Turmusin and the Asasiot would be a lower standard, have to be at the level of Kamachal ben Drusai when Shabbos comes in order for it to continue the cooking process. And again, he points out here that the law applies to a kira and a kofach equally. The other kinds of ancient ovens that we've discussed are also included in this no exception, and which is very consistent with what we learned. Okay. Now, if you did this even not willingly, you make a miscalculation, you don't realize it's Shabbos, you don't realize whatever, you make a mistake. Asurin, the food is not permitted to be eaten on Shabbos. It has to be asurin l'motzai Shabbos al kadeshi asu. You have to wait until after Shabbos ends, the time it would have taken to cook this thing after Shabbos, in order, as the Mishnah Berurah writes in Mem Ches, and then we'll go back. Look at Sifkat on Mem Ches. Al Kadesh Yasu, Kadesh Lo Yehana Mimasha Avar Alisa Derabanan. You shouldn't benefit from having violated a rabbinic prohibition. So we make you wait the amount of time after Shabbos that it takes to complete the cooking that took place on Shabbos.
Well, you assume that you took it off the fire on Shabbos.
No. It's fully cooked. Let's say it's fully cooked and now it's taken off taken off the fire on Shabbos.
Right.
We say you can't eat that until after Shabbos, the amount of time that it took on Shabbos to complete the cooking process. So if it took 15 minutes on Shabbos, so you have to wait after Havdalah 15 minutes. Right, exactly. It's a penalty. It's a rabbinic penalty for having that way you don't benefit any extra from what happened on Shabbos, because this is the time it would have taken after Shabbos to finish the cooking process. Again, he points out here, if you follow the Ramah, as we looked at in the last siman, then as long as it's cooked, kamachal ben drusai, to the minimal edible standard, that's enough. Then you don't have to worry about this whole halacha in the first place, because that's minimally cooked, and then you can continue with the shehiyah into Shabbos. Okay, let's back up now to Mem Hey, Mem Vav, and Mem Zayin in the Mishnah Berurah. So Asasiot v'Turmusin. these types of legumes which appear only in Eretz Yisrael, and turmusin, which is lupine. By the way, if you ask me to draw a picture of lupine, I would be able to draw a picture of lupine. I don't know what lupine is. Anyone know what lupine? Lupine. Okay, I just by the definitions that I see in the. Hold on, I'll look a picture up.
Must look like a wolf.
What was that?
I say it must look like a wolf.
It must look like a wolf. I also got the same thing. Yeah, I also got a lupine pet. Yeah, hold on. Let's see if I can pull up something more satisfactory. Okay, so it looks like this.
You don't remember this from Harry Potter?
I don't. But this
The
is what it
lupine.
looks like.
He's the one who turns into a werewolf.
Because he had lupine.
No, a lupine is Latin for wolf.
Oh, it means wolf. Okay, that's what it came up on the first.
For wolf.
Got it. It's been a while since Harry Potter. I'll admit it's been many a good years. Yeah, so we have here lupine. It's a type of plant. I assume it is edible sometimes, but we'll get some more detail on that right now. The reason you maybe never heard of it is for the following reason. This is the case with any other legumes as well. V'yirakos and vegetables. Okay, udvarim rachim. You see it down there. It's memhe in this. It was actually before the comment that I read before. Let me show you here. Right over here. Memhe. So that's the case with any vegetables as well. Udvarim rachim and any other soft foods that cook easily. Shekulam einan dom lebasar. It's not like meat that takes a while to cook it. V'kaim alan la'el v'seneration un gimel. We're doing some review now. When it's raw meat, you're allowed to place it close to dark, right on the fire, as when it's raw. Because obviously it's not going to be ready for the evening meal. And for tomorrow's meal, it will cook without having to play with the fire and stoke the coals. So therefore, the rabbis cut out an exception that it is permissible in that case. These are very easy to cook. You might stoke the coals with these types of foods in order to eat it that night. Okay, this is basically a review what we're talking about now.
How does it apply today? You're afraid that you're going to increase the flame or something?
Yes, correct. That's why if you control the dials and the knobs, you cover them. Then there's nothing to talk about. Now, letocha tanor, as we're about to read in a moment, again, Rabbi Weider's psak on this, and I don't think he's in the minority on this one. I think his assumption is that today's ovens are equivalent to the ancient Talmudic tanur in the sense that they can reach a very high level of heat, and since there is a similarity of characteristic, therefore, the tanur is one where you can never heat things inside it on Shabbos. If you leave it in there going into Shabbos, or let's say the food is already minimally cooked or something like that, and it's a grufo ktuma, let's say, so that might be a little bit different. Let's take a look here, though.
That comparison doesn't work because today's ovens, you set it at a certain temperature.
Right, you can control it.
It stays there.
But presumably you could have.
The old ones, it got hotter and hotter.
Right. Again, I'm not sure how they controlled for temperature as much as we do. I assume that they could control a little bit, right? Based on how much coal they put inside
that they work. Here you don't do any work.
Right. Yeah. You go like this.
I don't have to adjust it. I adjusted it for Shabbos and it stays that way.
Right. Now, for sure, putting it into an oven on Shabbos, even if it's a kira, you can't do that because that is that's nira kemevashel. It appears like you're cooking. The question is, can I do shahiyah in such a situation, right? Right, because again, inside an oven, it appears as if you're cooking. The question is, can I do it from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos? Right, so let's take a look. Let's look at the next comment here. I think this will maybe jog our memory a little bit. The tochatan or hainu afilu hu garuf v'katum. With an ancient oven, even if it's garuf v'katum, it's the coals were raked and it's the ashes were placed on top of the coals. then it still seems as though it's a problem in a tanur. Okay, hold on. I'm just going back to Reish Nun Gimel. I want to hold on. But tanur, right? We had seen a tanur afilu im husak bekashu glava asur lismach lo afilu garfakatum. That's the smicha discussion. Hold on. Where's the shahia one? Okay. Okay, this is a kofach probably, right? No, hold on. Gotta find the right comment here. He was right. So you couldn't even do smicha by a tanur, right? Putting it near it, not in it. Even if it was garu fekatum. Right. Look, so like I'll tell you what I do, by the way. Right. So on Friday night we'll have food in the oven before Shabbos, and then right before Shabbos we'll turn it off and we'll keep it in there. We'll leave it so it stays warm until it. That's I think that's very different. That's a very different situation and scenario. It's a very different scenario because there I've shut off the heat source completely, right? There's no fire whatsoever. That's not that's not comparable to this. Here you still have a heat source-ish kind of happening. It's just you've moved it, you've lowered it, you've something. There, I think it's very different.
So the idea, if you have a stove that's running, okay, and you want to put something to, I mean, it's running the whole Shabbat. You want to put something to warm something up. You can't keep it warm. You can't you can't do that.
On top, on the stove top,
Inside the stove.
Inside the oven, if it's still on, so
it's running the whole Shabbat.
Unless
can you put something inside?
In the middle of Shabbat, no, and there's certainly in the middle of Shabbat. The idea of chazara, of returning something to the fire in the midst of Shabbat inside the oven is not going to be okay because it gives the appearance of cooking. It's a rabbinic decree. Okay. Yeah, that's why we use a warming tray, something else, a blech, in order to reheat, in order to deal with this issue. Okay, let's just keep reading this comment though. Here he says, "Mihu tanur done." Our ovens, again, this is the subject of debate. I'm not saying that what opinion I mentioned before is the be all end all. There are people who I believe would maybe say otherwise. Danya lechira, it's more like a kira. Deshari garufakatum, which if it's garufakatum, you've controlled for the adjustment of the heat source. So then it's permissible to leave it in going into Shabbos. Certainly, if you've closed the oven, with a, you've put an extra layer of covering, meaning you covered it in clay. You're not easily going to break that clay unless the time comes for me to take the food out. Then therefore it'll be permissible. Kavi mash kosav harama b'sif aleph bahaga, as the Rama writes in Sif Aleph in the Rama. Now again, if you wanted, hold on one second.
So what is the issue here? That tuchatanu means gauf katum. What is that? When we just discussed this, that you're not allowed to put the stuff back in the stove, that's
to put it in. Here we're talking about Erev Shabbos, putting it in, and it stays in until Shabbos start, and into the beginning of Shabbos.
Oh, okay.
Right, that's what Shahiyah is. Shahiyah is Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. Chazara is when it's already Shabbos and then putting it back in. That's going to be not allowed inside an oven. Here it is allowed inside a kira, which is a certain type of ancient oven, but not in the tanur. I just want to look up here, also go back for a moment to that siman.
But it says letochtanu. You just said letochtanu.
Letocha tanur. So the question is a tanur here specifically mean a certain kind of oven? Oh. As a pakira is also a kind of oven. Today, in modern Hebrew, we would use tanur, interchangeably. We don't differentiate. All ovens are a tanur in modern Hebrew. So the question is here: does this? Just trying to remember.
This is a filo gauf v'katuv, means you can change the amount of heat in it.
If it has already been such that the heat source is under control now. Right, I rake the coals to the side.
Isn't that like a danger that you can change it by adding coals or?
No, because of that, it's less likely that you'll do it. That's why it
Because
might
it's
be,
set up.
that's why it would
Okay.
be okay in Akira.
Right,
In
okay.
a time where they were more strict about anything. But I just want to look here. I'm going back to the comments from the Mishnah Berurah back some time ago that we did. Okay. The kasha b'gvava eino aser b'tanor k'im b'eino garuf. Okay, there's a little bit of room for leniency in the oven we talked about over there, but anyway, so bottom line is, again, and I'm not talking about like the warming drawer. Warming drawer is a different thing. That's going to be for sure okay if you cover the dials and the knobs, but okay. So again, the halacha here very similar to what we've learned previously about shahiyah. In Akira, you are permitted to have the shahiyah inside, not on top. Everyone agrees is going to be okay if you're continuing the cooking process on top. But inside a tanur, it's not okay to do shahiyah from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. Kira, it is okay to do from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. And really the question that it comes down to, as we've talked about in the past, is what do we consider our ovens? So I go back to what I said, quoting from my Rebbe that he felt that our ovens today, because of the rove of the intensity of the heat, is compared to a tanur. Again, if I'm not mistaken, I believe those who are going to argue and not agree with that approach. But I guess it has a practical ramification on this question about shahiyah, Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, something that is cooking inside the oven, right? Okay. Questions? I mean, there's really a review, from what we've done some months ago now at this point. Okay, let's go to Siftes in the Shulchan Aruch. Oh no, we didn't finish one more comment. I'm sorry, Mem Zayin. Mem Zayin, Kishe'enem Grufim, when it's not, the coals haven't been raked. So he writes here, Akira Levadkoi. This is talking only about Akira. V'nakat Lashon Rabim Akiros to Alma, because most people have Kiros in those days of the Shulchan Aruch. That's why or the Ramah. Okay, we're talking about Akira here. The Kofach, even if it's a Kofach, which was again the ancient is an ancient oven, which had one spot, but not angled in a triangular fashion where the heat was intense in one spot, but it was a single use oven on top and internally, a single spot oven. So this kind of ancient oven, we said already, when the source of the heat is wood, it's too intense. Then grufo ktuma doesn't work. It's impossible. There's not still a way to rake the coals here that will re-intensify the heat. Okay. So that's why it's talking only about a tanur that this would be okay to do. Let's take a look at Siftes. So Kayot Sebo, we're back up on top now. Kayot Sebo, so similarly, by the way, Shlomo, you came literally for one of the hardest topics. This is like Hilchot Shabbat, like, you came today, that's like you dropped yourself right into the hardest. I'm telling you, by the way, you come back next week, it's going to be an easy topic. Okay, we're going to talk about, can you turn your fireplace on Shabbos, or before Shabbos, for Shabbos. Okay, Kayot Sebo, similarly, Lo Yimale Chavis Shel Mayim, you're not allowed to fill up a barrel of water, V'yitain l'toch tanur, and place it into a tanur. And here I'm not so sure that this is. We'll see if we're differentiating here between a tanur and a kira and a kofach. But you're not allowed to place it inside a tanur erev Shabbos im chashech, on erev Shabbos close to dark. If you did this, asur l'motzai Shabbos b'chdei sheyasu, then it's prohibited to utilize the water until after Shabbos and the amount of time it would take to have heated it up to that particular level.
So how is that different from having your warmer, I mean, the hot water? Are you doing it before Shabbat?
You're saying you put the hot water on, right? So this is different in the sense that the water is not cooked yet. Right here, I put the hot water on. All right, I put the water in right before Shabbos.
You put it early, they work, by Shabbos started, it's already hot.
It's already hot, or it's at least somewhere on the journey of
right,
being
okay.
warm.
So that is right before Shabbat, put it in.
You're right. So that's definitely a process. Take a look what he says here. Mem test. Shel mayim. Afal gav de mayim ru'in lishtos chaim. Of course, you could drink water raw. It's a funny word. You could drink water as is. You don't need to heat water up. Hayarari lios dinam keperos anechal chaim. And we could treat it like a fruit that's eaten raw, right? We talked about the halacha sif hey, about or sif dalad, that fruit that is eaten raw, like an apple, right? So it's permissible to place it around the kedera right before Shabbos, even though it's not going to roast or cook before Shabbos. But we allowed it because you could eat it raw. You don't. It's not the cooking process is unnecessary from a culinary perspective. So you could say, well, water is the same way. Why don't we allow that to be, have a shahiyah situation? Again, by the way, to put it on Shabbos is not allowed. That's cooking. But you can't cook from Erev Shabbos to Shabbos. You can't violate the prohibition. So we're talking about a rabbinic xerius. The rabbis didn't apply it to a raw fruit. Nevertheless, why is it for lack of a better way of translating it? Raw water is not as good as raw fruit. We turned it to the back side of it's probably the back page of the thing. Yeah. And it's in the Mishnah Berurah over here.
Oh, okay.
Top line here. Okay. So it's not like fruit. Raw water is not like raw fruit. Raw apples, delicious. Raw water, it's
Raw water being cold water.
Cold water, yeah. Here, uncooked water. It could be room temperature, by the way, but it's nonetheless nothing to talk about here. It's not even comparable. Water, it's plain water. Hot water is really a great enhancer to the water. And therefore the rabbis apply upon the water the gezerah of chitui, this decree of fear of that you're going to stoke the coals, because hot water is much more chashuv than room temperature water as opposed to raw fruit versus cooked fruit. Or you might even make the case that a raw apple is more delicious than a baked apple. Okay, so therefore, when the rabbis made this rule, they included water in the gzeira. Fine. I can accept that. I can hear that. Now, what about latocha tanur? Tanur shalanu in our kiras. Remember, they were using kiras, or the comparison of compared things that were compared to kira. Kishu garuf v'katum. When it is garuf and katum, when it is the coals have been raked and the ashes have been covering the coals. O shehu tuach betit, or it's there's a clay covering over the oven, so you won't bust open the clay covering. Shari, so then it's permissible. Chanis Karleil, as we've talked about before, the clay covering is on its own a good enough thing.
I was just thinking about, we have this pot, those are handed, so they add it on top of the oven that was hot. The water.
What are you referring to?
Hot water. How do they do hot water on Shabbat?
How do they do hot water? Good. So you could have it again if you had a kira. It's not a problem to have hot water inside it. It just needs to have been cooked before Shabbos, and the water needs to be hot before Shabbos. So presumably, if I had to guess what they did, they would have left it either the inside and then taken out what they want, but they can't put it back. Or the other thing they could do is leave it on top of a blech, right, with a pot cover, right? Heat the water up before Shabbat. By the way, then there in that case, probably not even, it's not even latocha tanur. You might even be able to get away with, if it's minimally cooked, whatever. Let's say you boil the water before Shabbos and you cover it and you leave it on the fire the entirety of Shabbos. That's my guess. I don't actually know. I didn't grow up in such a world. Correct, and you could do chazara. You would pour and put back. Correct, and you would put it right back down to the point where it hasn't.
Why can't you put it back? I mean, if it's the same thing, isn't it? Like you take water, you put it right back.
So on the inside, again,
different?
because of the gzera that the rabbis didn't like this idea that
People put
things
stuff
that
in there,
it's
right,
nirek mevashel, if it gives the
Okay.
appearance of cooking, even though of course you're not cooking, the water has been cooked already. It's been boiled. Yeah, it's but yes, they have always had hot water. So it's not whether can you have hot water on Shabbos, it's how do they do it, and that's how I think that they probably left it on top and they would put it back. Today we have, then at a certain point, probably there was a thermos that was invented, right? And so you poured the hot water before Shabbos, right? And I even remember as a little child that there was no such thing that was, plugged in, and it was, electric. My parents boiled the water before Shabbos. They poured from the kettle into the thermos, and then you closed it before Shabbos. By the time Shabbos was over, it wasn't such hot water anymore, but it was still, pretty good. So that you can still have, your coffee or your tea on Shabbos morning, Shabbos afternoon, or early Shabbos afternoon. By the end of Shabbos, it was less so. Okay, Nun Aleph, Erev Shabbos im chashecha, ila im ken yesh shehus sheyischamamu kodem bein hashmashos. So you're not allowed to place it in the oven Erev Shabbos as right before dark. Unless there's time during the day, unless what? There's time before sundown, that it could heat up. So again, here we're already, right? Even if it doesn't boil, let's say, it's not as hot as you want it to be, but it's already a little. Again, I would almost compare this to it's kamach ben drusai of water. Again, water is consumable in at any temperature. But bottom line here is that this is it doesn't sound like what he's saying has to have boiled, right?
I mean, except we're thinking about our water supply, which is which you drink without thinking about. But way back when, the water may not have been something that you drank without boiling it first.
Unless you boiled it, right? That's a good point. It's a good point. I grew up in such a world that I didn't have to worry about these things. You're right, absolutely right. I'm just looking on the Biur Nosafim, by the way, number 40. If Tommy has the same edition. So he says here two things. He says, this is my extra comments here. If it hasn't boiled, on Erev Shabbos, the Chazon Ish said, "She'ein lahotzi miktsasam b'Shabbos mishum shegorem al yidei zeh shamayim nisharu b'kder yimahor lihizbasha." So you have to be very careful. You can't, until it fully boils, take the water out, because if you remove some of the water, it will make it easier for the rest of the water to cook. And now you're hastening the cooking process of the water on Shabbos. I don't know if is that from a scientific perspective, is that, are we hastening the, I mean, look, if you have less water, it takes less to boil something. Obviously, I know that from my cooking experience. Anyways, okay, it's interesting. And then he says the Igros Moshe, right? The Chaim Vor B'Shas so Jews Igros Moshe. The Rav Moshe also agree. Mitamzeh af asar sham hashos es hamayim b'mecham kolzman shelo ratchu. Rav Moshe also didn't like the idea to do shehiyah on the water in a mecham. That's like what we have today, a kettle. Kettle. Mecham is a kettle.
Hot water.
Right? As long as if it hasn't boiled yet. Why? Shema yavo lahotzi miktsasam. Because I might pour some out before it boils, and then it will the water that's left inside will boil quicker. Me'idach. On the other hand, the Minchas Yitzchak, he's not so sure about that. Sheitachen shema shemakdim es habishul al yedei hasaras mania. Right? That you cause bishul to happen quicker, which is true, by removing something. He's like, I'm not sure that removing something is a problem. It's when I add something, I do something to it in a more proactive way, that it's a problem. It's like you stir it. Okay, I hear you stir it. That's a problem. It's not considered bishul umuter. Okay, so different opinions here. best to just boil the water before Shabbos anyways, particularly in our day and age where it's easy. But let's say you could caught and it's 5 minutes before Shabbos and you're scrambling, you're looking at your spouse, none of us boil the water. So what do? So put the water on, boil it, get it, at least minimally hot before Shabbos, but let the thing complete today with the electric urns, it'll shut off by itself once it's boiled, once it's fully cooked. So, at that point, this goes away, right? The point here is there's a fear that you'll cook it. So I'm not so sure that there should be a problem at that point. The next thing he mentions here in my Mishnah Berurah, ulahash in the biurim nosafim, ulahashos mayim mayim. If you do shehiyah on water and a mecha mayim, a water heater, right? Electric, chashmali, right? An electric water urn. Okay, which is how probably most of the people in, let's say, our community or in most Jewish communities now heat their water up before Shabbos. You have an electric urn and you leave it over Shabbos. So we do here in the shul. We have these things. So sheyesh bo tzinoris medidas gova hamayim. It has how do you translate tzinoris? Tzinor is like
it allows you to look at the height of
right. You can see the measures the height of the water. It's like I have it on mine. Right, you can see a half full, 3/4 full. Right, ba'ofen she'ein bedavar mishum iser shehiyah. Kigon she'ischam hamayim miktzas kodesh. We're not talking about it's a half cooked or it's done. It tells you it's done. Okay. Das Rav Elyashiv grown Rav Elyashiv Paskin. She also lishtamish bo b'Shabbos. Why? You can't use it on Shabbos. Mishum shemetzios hi shamayim shebetzinoris einam rodchin b'retichas hamayim shebemechan. Wowzers! This is true, by the way. Let's clarify. So how I have this on mine. Obviously, I don't follow Rav Elyashiv, so let's hope there's another opinion. You have in your hot water urn, you have the measuring part, right? And you can see water in it. Do you have this? I have this kind of. And you can see the water going down. You ever notice when you're boiling the water, you cannot see it boiling in the flask where it's measuring. So what does Rav Elyashiv? It's a whopper of a chiddush. Rav Elyashiv says that since it's not boiling, the water that's in this thing didn't boil. This water is unlike the rest of the water. This little strip of the, where it measures the water, that's not cooked. So I'm not allowed to use it.
It wasn't cooked before Shabbat.
Because it was cooked before Shabbos, the water that was in there. And of course, what happens as the water dissipates, the water falls back in. As you use the hot water, this water goes back into the rest of the water.
And now it warms on Shabbat.
Right. So it's in a little flask there. The water goes into the mecham. And therefore it cooks. Yisrokan mimeimav v'yavo lahosipo mayim b'Shabbos kedei shelo yisparek al yidei chom hagechalim ra'a masha hivenu legabe meichamim hamitzuim b'zmanenu shenech v'raposim b'dinam. So he says here, quotes some Yerushalmi, you're not supposed to use on Shabbos a mecham if it's not garuf mehagechalim, if it's not sort of in our situation, the dials are not covered. Kevan sheyesh lachush shema yisrokan mimeimav. You may remove from the waters, and you may add water on Shabbos. It'll become empty, and then you'll put water in it. So you don't want it to break. So if it's just coals and the kettle, you're worried the kettle is going to burst and break. So you put water in it. So they say don't even use it in the first place. He quotes as a.
But our devices don't empty out those.
What was that? Our devices are not like this, correct?
They don't have to, but it automatically reheats when it cools off.
Right. Some of them, unless you put the also mine has a Shabbos mode where
Shabbos put on it also, but you wouldn't have hot water by Shabbos afternoon. Because it's not well insulated.
it's not
It's not
well
thermos.
insulated.
The
Interesting.
outside is hot.
Because when I use the same thing on the weekdays in weekday mode, and it takes a while, or unless you open it and you cause the heat to dissipate, it doesn't go into that mode very often. That's what I noticed.
I can't tell.
And I thought that the Shabbos mode deactivates that so that it's just a very good thermos. It holds the heat in very, very well.
The outside is hot. We have to cover it up so we don't burn ourselves.
Right. Interesting.
I have the same thing.
Really? Mine's very cold on the outside, actually. Now that I think about it, it's cold.
Which will be?
I don't know. It's all with the Shabbos mode. It's like
I also have
it's a heavy duty. I don't know. I got it as a gift from I think either my parents or my in-laws. Someone gave it to us as a gift. I don't remember. Bottom line is this Rav Eliashiv is a whopper of a chiddush. I mean that because a little tiny bit of water. I don't know. I think that's not Minhag Yisrael today. And the question is why is he wrong? I hear his point. Is that really true that water inside there didn't at least heat up a little bit? Meaning, because I would argue as long as it's heated up, it's been heated up a little bit. Your action is not.
The idea is.
I guess you're actively cooking it. Saying. You're doing a mania though. That's the point. That's the point. When you're monea something, you just remove.
Such a small portion that it sort of dissolves. It has no effect.
Right. His whole argument that I cook that water, right? When it goes back in, it cooks. To me, it's I don't know. It's a little too cute. I don't know. I think that there's certainly what to argue with it in terms of you're also being Monet. You're removing. I didn't actively cook. It sort of fell in. That's this whole argument here, right? If it's just sort of falling in, right? So the Minchas Yitzchak had said, well, al yedei hasaras mania, right? You're just removing something that's preventing it. That's not nechshav kibishul. I didn't cook it. Anyways, I don't know. Again. Meaning Yisrael Torah here, that if Jewish people in mind.
That's why the new ones don't have that. They don't have the medida.
They don't have the medida. I have a Shabbos mode one that has the medida. It doesn't. Again, maybe it cooks by the way on the inside. I have to look. Next time I'm going to boil. Next time I'm going to look. And I'm going to look. Because you're saying it's a separate spout or something.
The idea is when you fill it up, it goes up, and you didn't turn it on yet. Right. So it's actually cold water. Now, as the water go down, that goes right inside it, and it warms up and it cooks.
I'm gonna look. I bet you that this has been taken care of. I bet you Rav Eliashiv has enough pull that this is. I bet you I'm gonna try it today, and I bet you I will see the water boil. I don't never pay attention. The water will boil. Mark my words. I bet you that they wouldn't have given a shkacha without Rav Eliashiv's. Anyways, okay. Cute topic. Okay, so let's just finish the last comment of the Mishnah Berurah, and then we'll be done for today. We were in the middle of it here. You're not allowed to place water in a pot on Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos starts. The only reason you put the water there is because you don't want the pot to burst from the intensity of the heat. So you put water in there. I don't have no interest in drinking the water. It's just in order to save it from, bursting. So I have no incentive. Why am I, what's the purpose of stoking? I have no purpose. I actually don't want it to heat up too fast. The point here is I just don't want the pot to burst from the intensity of the heat. And so therefore the water helps with that. Why don't we allow it? Because this is how people wash their dishes. If they didn't have a sink, how do they get water that they wanted to soak the dirty dishes? Or they had hot water. So how did they do it? Water was in the oven.
So you're allowed to put it in on Shabbat, and because you want to wash dishes?
No, he's saying you can't.
Oh, okay.
He's saying you can't because
Right.
you could have an incentive for the hot water. What's the incentive? Because I'll use the hot water to wash the dishes.
Right, okay.
And then I'll stoke the coals of the tanur so that the water heats up. And therefore, You need to be careful to place the water earlier on Friday afternoon so that the water heats up minimally before Shabbos starts. Then you can utilize the water on Shabbos however you want. You want to wash the dishes with hot water. You're not allowed to. The problem with the hot water today in the dishes from our sink is that by here is a real problem, right? If you take the water out, the hot water out of the hot water
It goes
tank,
back, it warms it up.
new cold water flows in from the pipes because it senses, hey, the water level went down. New water, this I guess is what Rav Eliashiv's point is to his credit. New cold water flows in, right? We know this. If you take a shower, a few people take a shower back to back. Suddenly the hot water goes away. What happens? You come back 30 minutes later, hot water is hot again because new cold water has fallen into the hot water tank and is heating up. That's why when I wash the dishes on Shabbos or I do anything really, I don't use the hot water, so I only use the cold water.
When you use it to sink, it really affects the.
It may not affect it that much, but at the end, and this is why I guess I'm saying what I'm saying against Rav Eliashiv here. But at the end of the day, you're removing the water and you're causing new water. And based on it's funny. It's like I would never have thought it. Rav Eliashiv.
That's a new one. How we thought about that? That's the
But I don't know. I'm trying to remember back if like I'm gonna test my urn today, right? Can I see the water boiling in the urn where it's measuring? Meaning, is it just the picture of what's happening on the inside, or is it a separate pipe?
But
if it's just a picture of the inside, I'm getting a window into the inside world, so no big deal. Then I'm just getting a window into the inside world.
But you don't turn the heat on unless it's full, right? You don't turn it on. So there's no way that the water that went up the pipe get any.
But the question is, like the one I have today, doesn't even have a pipe. I know what we're talking. I know what he's describing. I've seen those hot water heaters, those hot water urns.
Those are old ones, yeah.
Those are older
The new
ones.
they don't
I don't know if they actually have a pipe which is completely separated from the rest of that the water doesn't get affected by it. I actually don't think that mine is like that. I think mine is really one unit. You know what I'm talking about? It has. I don't know that mine has that. There may be one that we used to have here, which I don't know if we even possess anymore, which may have had that quality or characteristic. But anyways, that's all. Yeah. The question also over there is like, in an older one, may not have been heating up anymore. So the water that's falling back in, it's falling into hot water, but is it getting cooked fully? It's getting heated. I don't know, whatever. I'm going to take a look.
The water is connected.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Sorry for a little bit of the all over the place with this water case. But anyways, we finished this simon. We finished this topic. We're totally done with it. Hopefully we have some decent understanding of the laws of Shahiyah, the laws of Chazara, the laws that relate to bread on Erev Shabbos, and all sorts of different foods. One shouldn't be scared from this topic, hopefully. One should feel confident that we understand how to do it the right way. And I'm always here personally if you have ever any questions about things relating to your situation in your kitchen. Next week, we will begin Rishon and Hay, Hachanas Ha'esh Kodem Hachnasas Shabbos, the preparation of a fire before Shabbos. This is less relevant in our context with the heating systems that we have today. But if you enjoy using your fireplace, be sure to tune in because this will be very relevant to how to properly use your fireplace on Shabbos. And how do you prepare it on Erev Shabbos? That'll be our topic next week. It's a very short simon. You can see the entirety of the simon on this page that we were just on. It's a very realistic possibility we finish the whole thing in one shot. If not, it'll take 2 weeks. And then from there, we will go on to the topic of the Sheish Tekios, the 6 shofar blasts that used to happen before Shabbos. And perhaps why we don't do them today. What is our modern day equivalent of these Sheish Tekios? And then we will get to the next big topic, which is Reish Nun Zayin of Hatmana, which we have already previewed in a few contexts. But that will be the next large topic, which we will delve into, that will probably take us probably a month or so to really get all the way through. Okay.
Hatmana again is what, Rabbi?
Hatmana is when we envelop food in a heat source. It's enveloped at either on top of a heat source or
Right.
inside the heat source. Can I use that on Shabbos? Can I return things like that on Shabbos? Can I have it Erev Shabbos into Shabbos in a certain, depending on what the heat source is. So we'll talk about that. That has a little more practical ramifications in terms of people wrapping things in towels and blankets and when they're heating food up. Can you do it? Can you not do it? We'll talk more about that.